Well, welcome everybody today to ISACTech's webcast as part of the Bradmark Innovation Series. Today's TechCast, SAP Sybase ASE, new capabilities for improved performance and scalability on large databases. My name is Mike Harold, and I am the Executive Director of ISACTech, and I'll be hosting and moderating this process for the next hour. With us today as special speakers, we've got Peter Thawley from SAP's Global Database Solutions Group, and Bill Baker from Bradmark Technical Sales Support. A couple of logistical things before we begin. We are recording the session, and the recording and the slides for the session will be online on the ISACTech site, usually within 1 to 2 days after the presentation. If you have questions during the presentation, you can send them using the chat box on the GoToMeeting panel. What we will do at the end of the presentation, we will have a Q&A session. We'll take the questions that you submit during the course of the presentation at that time and pose them to Peter and Bill, who will answer those questions at that time. We will not be doing a live Q&A session with the audience on this TechCast because of the large number of attendees. So make sure you send those questions in during the course of the presentation. A couple of notes. This is the first of 3 webcasts we'll be doing as part of the Bradmark series. We'll have the detailed information on the ISACTech website once we have that available for the second and third sessions, but we will be covering SAP Sybase Replication Server and also SAP Sybase IQ in sessions 2 and 3. The second session is tentatively scheduled for November 12th. You'll receive information about that in your inbox as soon as we've got that all firmed up. If you are still considering going to SAP TechEd and you've not yet registered, you've got a couple of options. If you want a full conference pass, you can use Bradmark's exhibitor code, and you can receive a $100 discount towards the purchase of that full conference registration. That discount code is TE13 Bradmark 2121, so you can utilize that. If you wish to go to the conference but do not need to attend any of the hands-on technical sessions, if you're an ISACTech Gold member, you can register for the special ISACTech lecture-only pass, which is $1,100 off the cost of the full conference registration, but again, does not get you access to the hands-on sessions, and there are several of those in the ASE and Rep Server world this time around. And speaking of TechEd, both Bradmark and ISACTech together will be hosting a special VIP social event. Make sure you stop by one of our booths in the exhibit hall on Wednesday and pick up your invitation for that, and we'd love to see you there. And so, without any further ado, I'm going to hand the presentation over to the meaty details. And Peter, it's all you.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you to all of you for giving us an hour of your time today. I know everybody's busy. So let me get right into it. There we are. We're going to talk a little bit about, the new release of ASE. And probably one of the first questions you're asking is what is this new SP format that we are naming our products in? And just wanted to let you know that in the SAP world, SAP uses the term Service Pack or SP as a replacement for what we at Sybase used to call ESDs. So starting really now, you're going to start to see us really talk about releases and service packs as the primary sort of numbering scheme. So today we're going to talk about a release that we made generally available in June of this year. It was codenamed Karina, so some of you may have heard that code name if you interact with us in any detail. But we've really focused in quite a few areas, and if you've been following ASE for the last few years, you'll know we've really put a lot of focus in the areas of performance and operational scalability, areas of usability, and really efficiency that's been kind of the hallmark of ASE for forever. So if we dive into some of the details, ASE has historically been very much targeted in 4 or 5, core industries. One of the great things about the SAP acquisition is it is really broadening ASE's usage in areas that traditionally, the Sybase teams have not been really very strong, and that's that's really helping us in terms of what we do in new features and prioritizing those, for everyone's benefit. And just some quick examples there of kind of the extreme side of the applications world that Sybase has historically been quite strong in. When we look at this Carina release, which we've codenamed SP100 for ASE 15.7, in the area of performance, we're finding that ASE is really getting deployed, especially in the SAP Business Suite application space, for a lot of areas that more traditionally we would have probably put IQ in terms of recommendations. But given the fact that most people use ASE not only for core transactions but in their more of a mixed workload scenario, we've been doing a lot of work to enhance the capability of the optimizer and the query execution engine, specifically around more larger decision support, DSS types of workloads. And so we've done a lot of work around optimizing for star joins. We see in the SAP world quite a few very large what SAP calls business warehouses, which is effectively a data mart or a data warehouse for the SAP applications world. And some of those are quite large, in the order of 20, 30, 40 terabytes. So that's put some additional requirements on us that are really benefiting all of the SAP and Sybase customer base. So a lot of areas around star join performance that we've worked on. We've also done quite a bit of work over the past 4 or 5 releases now of ASE 15.7 around large objects, so text and image. I know that historically the Sybase customers have not really utilized large text or large image sorts of data types, primarily due to weaknesses in the underlying storage and database kernel. But it's getting to the point now, just based on what we've done in the last 3 years or so, that these really are becoming or have become first-class data types now. Lots of performance optimizations, which we'll talk a little bit more about. We've also done quite a bit of work around creating indexes. We've made it both an online function now, as well as doing a lot of work around minimizing how much data we have to scan in order to build these indexes and build multiple of them concurrently. And everyone benefits from all of this work, right? Whether or not you're using large objects or not, there are many, many benefits that give performance optimizations and more efficient storage structures, which means less storage cost for all of you guys. If we look at some other areas, and you'll notice in this presentation that we kind of go back and forth between things that were put into interim releases of ASE. So in fact, you'll see a list here of things that were put into what was called ESD2 about a little over a year ago. Some that are very influential in terms of performance. Materialized views is something that many database people have an understanding of. It's been a technology, if you will, that some other vendors have added over the years. We have added it in ESD2 or SP20 now. We call them pre-computed result sets, but it basically means that we store this materialized view, and any changes to the data that underlie that materialized view are updated in real time as the transaction occurs and commits. So a very common technique, especially in decision support and data mart types of environments, for data that is being requested frequently, in order to minimize long calculation times to do group by or particular order by kinds of processing that are best done sort of on the fly. Secondly, I talked on an earlier slide about our hash-based indexing, create index model. We also have that same technology that was put into the update stats. This really minimizes the amount of space we need in TempDB, as well as just being a much faster approach to updating statistics. So we know that everyone has challenges around their maintenance windows and how those are getting squeezed to almost nothing in many cases. Thirdly, we added the ability to basically allow you to mix and match some of the optimizer directives. So if you recall, ages ago in 15.0, I believe, we created this model of system-defined optimization goals to optimize maybe for very high-end extreme OLTP versus more decision support-oriented. And in order to do that, we created all of these different capabilities in the optimizer and the execution engine that now we can mix and match and allow customers who are perhaps a little bit more advanced to be able to really fine-tune an optimizer's choices to kind of balance the cost and time of optimization versus the benefit. So we see quite a few of our larger customers really doing quite a bit of enhancement around this area for their own. And then finally, we've added a query plan sharing. So if you've been around ASE for a long time, you'll know that query plans were not reentrant, that in fact if you had two users simultaneously executing the same store procedure or the same dynamic SQL statement, then in fact you had multiple plans in cache. And now we've predominantly, in order to minimize memory consumption and really to try to squeeze out the most efficiency, we've created a query plan sharing model to really minimize the cost of memory here. Just a quick picture. If you're not familiar with materialized result sets, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but this is a good graphical kind of picture of what it would look like and what people tend to use to effectively create pre-computed data without actually having to recompute the entire data set. So very good feature, especially for operational kinds of reporting capabilities. If we turn now to efficiency, kind of resource efficiency, operational scaling, so helping you guys do do more with less resources, both people resources as well as time and compute and things like that. We've done quite a bit of work around a more streamlined interprocess communication model. So when clients and servers are executing on the same hosts, which happens quite a bit, just streamlining the communication, the TDS communication layer to make that much more focused. I think almost everyone will probably stand up and cheer when we talk about some of the things that we've done around incremental backups, around rolling upgrades of the ASE software, around index creation, both in terms of utilizing as much of the CPU and core capacity as you have in order to provide good speed up of the actual index creation operation, as well as now enabling you to build indexes while your end user community is still doing insert, update, delete, DML type of activity. All very focused on really minimizing the maintenance window tasks that you have to do, where you have to kick users off the system or God forbid, bring the system offline from your user community. If we drill in a little bit to incremental updates, backups, we are providing something that is really focused on optimizing restore time. Certainly, our backups have been online now for many, many years, since actually System 10. And so in order to optimize for restore time, excuse me, we've actually implemented something which is probably more accurately called cumulative backups. And so if you look at the top of the chart here, what we're trying to depict is that as you take transaction log dumps, however often you take them, given a relatively steady state of volume, your log dumps are roughly, the same size. But when you have to do a restore, you've got to iterate through, tens or potentially even hundreds of transaction log dumps to bring your system back to a consistent state. With the cumulative backup model that we see depicted at the bottom of the chart, what we do is we create backups of everything that has been done incrementally since the last full backup. That implies now that although these cumulative backups do grow in size, when it comes time to do a restore, pardon me for advancing the slides by accident, you really only need to apply the full plus one cumulative backup plus however many transaction log backups you've had since the last cumulative. So it's really about, again, minimizing the time to get your system back into a functioning productive state again. So just a quick picture of what that might look like. As we said, recovery strategy. You could still choose to apply all of the logs if you wanted to. However, just from a pure timing perspective, the fastest way to get to your most consistent state is through the latest cumulative plus however many incremental transaction logs have occurred. If we also added something which becomes much more important now as we see much larger databases being used. In the historical Sybase customer base, it was not, or I should rephrase that, it was fairly common to see the largest databases, in the, couple of terabyte range. Even those were pretty darn large for a lot of customers. In the SAP world, I would say that average size is now well into, the 10 terabyte range for ASE. And we're seeing these BW data mart implementations, as I said, that are 20, 25, 30 terabytes running on an ASE. And so one of the things we had to do to really manage databases of that size is to allow concurrent dump databases and dump transactions to happen at precisely the same time. Because today what would happen is once you started doing a full backup, basically you couldn't do a dump transaction until that full one was done. And so if you had a crash, at some point, you could only recover, a certain amount of data. And so now that we allow these concurrently, means that you can really recover much more, up to the moment of the crash. Okay, turning now to usability and security. Again, quite a few features that are focused on operational scalability here, things like incremental reorg. So again, when you get tables that are multiple terabytes just for a single table, reorgs and things of that nature take a long time. And so usually, people's maintenance windows are not that large anymore. And so our incremental reorg facility basically allows you to run reorg for a defined period of time, maybe 30 minutes, you pick the time. And the next batch or maintenance window that you come into and run the reorg again on that same table, it will effectively pick up from where it left off and continue on from there. We've done a lot of work around shrink database and dropping devices. We find this will be quite beneficial, especially if your storage admins are using virtualized storage models. Done a lot of work around providing kind of a standalone restore utility for point-in-time recovery. Quite a bit of work around dump and load just from a performance and functional perspective. More monitoring and diagnostics improvements, and a lot of work around permissions and roles that we'll talk a little bit about as well. So shrinking databases basically allow you to remove a device entirely or part of a device. If there's still data on that device, obviously we've got to move that data onto one of the other existing devices that your database is built on. But we can guarantee that when the operation is complete, then in fact, you can remove that device. It will be removed from your database. And in fact, if you build devices on separate or individual storage LUNs, you can actually hand that LUN back to the storage folks who can reuse it for some other system that they're managing. So good incentive to build devices and LUNs to be approximately the same size. You can do partial ones as well. I think that is not quite as functional, just in terms of how your storage administrators probably think about storage, because they think about it primarily from a LUN perspective. But you might have other, ASE devices that you might want to build onto that, freed up space as well. Point-in-time recovery, we have a standalone utility now. We found that this has been a big requirement for us in the SAP world, primarily because of the skill sets and the people that are using ASE. Probably not quite as advanced as some of our longtime Sybase customers. And this basically allows you to simply script restores or invoke them on the command line without using, iSQL or knowing iSQL commands and things like that. Over the last couple of releases, we had also done quite a bit of work around maintaining dump histories, backup histories, so that you have full access from the ASE's perspective as to precisely what the latest backups were, what the files were that they were backed up to, and how to restore from them. We'll spend a moment talking about permissions and kind of where that's going. There's been a lot of talk in the security community about internal threats to especially databases, which contain so much rich information that hackers would love to get into. And in many cases, government regulatory bodies have done have instituted a lot of regulation around this. And it's really, I think, forced the database community in particular to take a look at roles and how we can match business-specific roles and privileges to kind of the jobs that people have. Pardon me, someone's calling me. And so we have this very granular mechanism now to allow you to construct permissions and roles. In the past, we really had very fixed privileges, and especially around system privileges. So things like server-wide commands for creating databases or setting tracing properties. And nobody wanted developers to have access to some of these tracing properties that might be important in finding root cause of query performance issues. Same thing with database-wide commands. They were very constrained. Now, when we look at what starting in SP20 or ESD2 we provide, we have a huge increase in the number of grantable system privileges, more than 100 now in total. 50 of which are sort of server-wide privileges for password changes, dumping databases, shutting down systems, and then database-wide things for table creation. And you can mix and match these now to construct really very useful privileges that are very specific to the kind of roles that you have created inside your own organizations, which can often be, very different from one company to another. We also have this concept now, starting in ESD2, that we call predicated privileges. And this allows you to really build very flexible, very low-level access controls. Access to information can now be more easily granted subject to conditions that are in play at the time that someone is accessing the data. So things like what system are they accessing it from? Who is the user? A lot of this you could do in the old days through a lot of script in a login trigger, but we've now created ways to do it much more simply, much more easily, and also to provide a level of row-level access by effectively really tagging sensitive data and whether or not a given user can see something in a given security domain. So when we look at this in a little bit more detail, you can think of predicated privileges as applying SQL where clauses to a grant statement that allows us to control now who gets to do what and when they get to do it, right? And then we also add the capability to use, again, a where clause kind of construct to allow us to decide who gets to assume a role and when. So we think of those as role activation predicates of a grant. So finally, I'm going to kind of wrap up and talk a little bit about where kind of things are going, because having been part of the SAP world now for going on about 3 years, we've really been marching towards a roadmap where a lot of the things that we wanted to do as Sybase, we're now getting the opportunity, given increased investment in the products on the engineering side and on the sort of technical side of the consulting and sales organizations. So the goal for us at SAP is really to build what we think of as a real-time data platform, and that extends what we started at Sybase around really trying to integrate these data management technologies in a way that makes it much easier for customers to utilize kind of the right system for the right tool. There's a huge investment in SAP right now on a in-memory database and more of a real-time database that we call SAP HANA. Some very incredible innovations that have gone on in that. You'll find over time that HANA and IQ get very, very close, and we'll talk about some of that in our third instance of the Bradmark Innovation Series around IQ. But also the integration between ASE and HANA, between ASE and IQ, is getting much, much deeper. All to be able to offer customers a more compelling platform for building applications that have, in some cases, very low latency transactional requirements, but in other cases, much more, data warehousing or data mart sort of requirements. So with that, I want to introduce Bill Baker in a moment. We've kind of talked through this slide, so I'll skip that. I want to say a couple of things about Bradmark before I turn it over. Bradmark has been a very long time, very close partner with Sybase and now with SAP, and they've really broadened their partnership with the SAP and Sybase teams. It used to be they just provided the best damn monitoring tool in the industry for ASE and IQ and RepServer. But now they've really extended and are becoming really an extended part of our organization to be able to sell and support and service, really all of the Sybase products, that we sell. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Bill. Bill, thanks for being part of this.
Thank you, Peter, and thank everybody for attending the webcast today. Today, I'll be talking about a little bit more. Peter mentioned some about the relationship, but the relationship between SAP and Bradmark Technologies, and how to use the MDA tables to monitor your SAP Sybase ASE databases. And then we'll end up with how Bradmark Surveillance DB solution uses the MDA tables to help us monitor and manage our ASE databases. Next slide, please. So Bradmark's a 30-year-old global company with offices in the U.S., Europe, and China. We're a leading developer of software solutions for enterprise database management environments. Our customer base is 50 of the Fortune 100 and over 280 of the Fortune 500 customers. As Peter mentioned, we're an SAP strategic partner and consistently recognized by SAP HP Software Magazine as a leading developer of application solutions for enterprise environments. And we're official reseller of SAP database and technology products, including ASE, IQ, and Replication Server. Next slide, please. So here's some assumption and goals for today's webcast. The assumption is that you're already familiar with the installation, setup, and use of the MDA tables. So we're not going to go into a lot of detail on what's available in each of these tables. But as a note, there are several past ISUG presentations available for viewing that do go into great detail on these tables. Those can be found on the website. So the goals are to learn about the required components for using the MDA tables and how Bradmark's Surveillance DB solution correlates and displays the MDA table data to help you detect and diagnose some common performance issues. Next slide. The SAP Sybase Pervasive Metrics Collection and MDA environment consists of the four components that you see here. The MDA tables are installed locally for each monitored server, and predefined static configuration parameters are set. There are two collection methods available: local collection and storage, where the ASE server is used to collect and store the metrics, and a job scheduler is used to determine how often and at what time the metric collection process is executed. Optionally, when cross-server analysis is desired, a central repository can be created, and like the local land collector, ASE, along with the job scheduler, is used to collect the metrics locally and then move the data from the local collectors into the central repository for performance analysis. With the ASE 15.7 SP100 release, SAP introduced a couple of diagnostic and MDA enhancements. This included server-wide DML metrics and instance-level elapsed time monitoring. Server-wide DML metrics provide server-level counters for selects, inserts, updates, merge, and deletes. And this provides us a direct way of determining the level of activity in each of these areas. Instance-level elapsed time monitoring provides the ability to determine how much time the server has spent performing work. And in combination with the server time, event time metrics provided by MonSysWaits, we can now understand the amount of time the server has spent in performing different tasks. Next slide. Similarly to the Sybase metrics collection, Surveillance DB utilizes the MDA tables for metrics collection. But the collection process is driven by a local agent consisting of the service subagents and collection subagents that are installed on the server. Here, the collection subagents connect to the database to gain access to the metrics in the MDA tables. And the metrics are temporarily written to a TempDB segment. They're stored in a local data store and then forwarded to a central repository database. The entire collection and store process is controlled by the Session Agent Manager, or SAM, as you see in the middle of the diagram. Collection can be initiated in one or both of two ways. When a client connection is made to the SAM, the collection subagents will look to see if the requested information is already in the TempDB. And if it is, the SAM will forward the information back to the client. If the information is not in the TempDB, then the collection subagent will begin the collection process as described above. In addition to client-invoked collections, the repository service subagent will, based on user-defined collection rules, periodically collect and store information to the local data store for real-time analysis and to a central repository for historical analysis and reporting. The user-defined collection rules determine what metrics are collected and stored and how often. While the client-initiated collection process will always return the requested real-time statistics, the repository collection process can be configured to collect any or all of the information from the MDA tables. But what metrics actually get stored locally and what gets forwarded to the central repository is not controlled entirely by the collection rules. It's controlled by a set of user-defined store rules, and the store rules are executed independently of client-invoked collection. Next slide. So as you saw in the preceding slides, both the Sybase and Surveillance DB collection processes can utilize repositories. So let's talk about why this is desirable. Well, there's multiple reasons for using repository, and this slide points out the most common ones. I'm not going to read all the bullet points here, but I'd like to address two of them. The first reason for using repositories is to help avoid impacting the monitored server. Repositories provide a common place for multiple DBAs to get metrics so that there are not multiple requests being run against the database by each of the DBAs. So really this avoids impacting the CPU, the I/O, etc. of the monitored server. The second bullet I'd like to point out is the last one on the two types of repositories. Surveillance DB uses two types of repositories, a short-term and a long-term. The short-term repository allows users to capture and run data for flashback, which is surveillance's root cause analysis tool, and it allows users to run historical data and see it as though it's occurring in real time. The long-term repository allows users to save information to a relational database for as long as needed for reporting, trend analysis, or capacity optimization. Next screen, please. The next few slides are examples of how Surveillance DB uses the metrics collected from the MDA tables to populate the collection windows or dashboards. Here we're looking at the Sybase ASE Server Health Dashboard, and that dashboard provides a high-level overview of the key reliability and performance metrics for a Sybase server. This particular dashboard is built from multiple MDA collections, specifically MDA Health Activity, Health Instance, Health Long SQL, Health NetIO, and Health Process. The events displayed at the bottom of the dashboard were produced by the Analyzer and Alerter service subagents. The analyzer subagent checks the collected data values against user-defined rules to determine if an event has occurred. The alerter subagent then processes the event and performs one or more user-defined event actions. These events are intelligent events, and clicking on them will actually launch one or more collection windows that are automatically synced to the time that the event occurred. Next slide, please. So here's an example of a dashboard that we can use to analyze long-running queries. The top part of the dashboard provides detailed information on the process running the SQL query. Looking at the dashboard, we can see execution statistics such as elapsed time, CPU time. We can see the objects that are accessed, the total reads and writes, and in addition, any locks held by that particular process. The lower portion of the dashboard provides statistics on the actual SQL statement. So here we see things like the complete SQL text and the accompanying query plan. Next slide, please. Here's an example of a dashboard designed to give the DBA response time related information based on weights. Here we can see what constitutes the total wait time, and in addition, a breakdown of the event time by class. Next slide, please. So a common problem that we deal with is block processes. So the block processes dashboard provides a hierarchical tree view of currently blocked processes. This dashboard is used or can be viewed by clicking on the block processes toolbar button or by clicking on an event that's displayed on the global health dashboard. By double-clicking any of these colored boxes, you can launch the process detail window that you see on the right, and it provides detailed information on the blocking or block process and any SQL being executed by that process. And if you have the proper database authority, you can resolve the blocking situation by killing any of the processes displayed in the window. Next slide, please. So in summary, Bradmark has been a Sybase strategic partner since 2005 and an official reseller of SAP database and technology products, including ASE, IQ, and Replication Server. The Surveillance DB monitoring solution automates the task of collecting, correlating, and displaying metrics from the MDA tables. The various dashboards that we saw are populated with real-time or historical data to facilitate problem detection and analysis. The automated event management can be tailored to your specific database environment and will notify you when any of the parameter thresholds you have specified are breached. So this completes my portion of today's webcast. Thank you for your time, and I'll turn it back over to Mike.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Peter, for the presentations today. We're going to move on to the question and answer session now, which I'll be posing the questions to the pair of you. Anybody in the audience that wishes to ask a question that has not already sent one in, please go ahead and do that now using the chat box in the panel. Once we are out of questions, we will end the session. So if you have a question, please make sure you do put that in as quickly as you can. Okay, so one of the questions came in, and I did respond back to everybody, and hopefully everybody saw it, is yes, that the slides and the presentation recording will be available on the ISAC Tech site in the next day or two. And if you attend this event, you will have access to that content without any problems at all. So moving on to the first of the technical questions. Peter, this one is absolutely for you. And the question came from Ray Rankins, and he asked, can you create additional indexes on materialized views?
Hey, Ray. Long time no talk to. How are you? I'm going to have to double check that. I know that when we were working on this, the desire was to build indexes, but there were a few challenges. So let me just double check that it actually made it into the release. But clearly that is an important thing to be able to do. So if it missed the release window, it would come in in an ESD or an SP shortly thereafter.
Great, thank you. Okay, next question, also for Peter. With execution plan sharing, is the engine local procedure cache not needed? And the question came from Richard Kinreed.
Hey, Richard. Good question. So, engine local caches are used primarily to also cache plan-specific data. So even though plans are shared, it's important to note that that some of the actual data structures that are used contain execution-specific variables and things like that. So the answer is no. You'll still need to have some engine local cache, set aside to be able to better manage the execution-specific data. Because our scheduling algorithms still try to keep a SPID on the same engine, if at all possible, to maximize some of the caching behaviors that we have there.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Peter. And another question came in. What will be the impact on performance while devices are being removed? And I think that goes to the shrink database section that you covered.
Right. So as you might expect, there's definitely going to be a hit on performance, right? Now, I say that with a bit of a grain of salt because imagine you set up your devices to match things like partitioning keys, and if you are effectively offloading data, archiving data out of ASE based on some partitioning key value, and then removing that device, then in fact you might find that there is minimal, if any, access to that data, and so the performance hit question will be quite minimal, somewhere on the order of 1% or 2%. If, however, you're basically consolidating devices and you're moving active data from one device to another that's currently in use, we've seen the performance hit be in the 5 to 7% range, something like that. Obviously it introduces more locking semantics that we have to deal with, so we have to ensure that as we move pages and extents that are already allocated to particular objects, that no one can kind of get in there and muck with that while we're making that change. So I think the common answer that I've seen in some of the testing we've done is around 5 to 7%.
Great, thank you very much, Peter. I appreciate that. Next question, and not necessarily specific to this presentation itself, but a question came in if there are any perceived dates for end-of-lifing 1503.
I do not have any dates on end-of-life for 1503. I don't think it's imminent. We're still in the 15.x release cycle. And so I don't think our plan would be to end-of-life anything that is a 15.0 category for some time now. I should probably double check that just in case. But
okay,
Mike,
cool.
just a logistics question, Mike. On some of these that we're not answering, when I get their answers, will we also send those answers out to the attendees?
Yeah, we can add those along with the slides and the recording, definitely. Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay. Question with regards to monitoring privileges and if those can be assigned. The questioner has an OEM third-party monitoring product, not Bradmark, that requires SA privilege, and they prefer not to give the monitoring tool SA.
Yes, and in fact, that's the whole purpose, is to be able to take things that really shouldn't require an SA type privilege, such as monitoring or operations, reorgs and things like that, and to really be able to fine-tune them to only give the privileges that you need, and monitoring is one of the obvious ones.
Okay, cool, thank you. Purva asked if you can elaborate more on the hash index.
So today, when we look at update stats and create index, there is a whole lot of sorting going on, and sorting, as we can expect, is a very expensive thing for a database to do. It requires a lot of CPU time and a lot of intermediate storage that has to be allocated and then freed up. The hashing technique basically allows us to walk through data once and utilize a hash model to basically, with a single call to a hashing function, on a key, to be able to get a lot of information for update stats, but also in terms of managing where the data needs to go. So the great thing about hashing functions is that they're they're very predictable in terms of time and performance, and they're very efficient to do as well. So the primary benefit really is update stats. You'll see some pretty dramatic speed up, orders of magnitude kind of speed up for update statistics using this particular technique. Create index is a little bit less of a performance speed up as compared to update stats, simply because the dominant component of creating indexes is really the the I/O side of the equation. So you'll see some speed up, but not orders of magnitude on on create index.
Okay, great. And another question on index is basically how can you create a function-based index without blocking the table data access?
Good question. I don't know the answer to that. I'll have to look into that.
That might be a secret sauce question.
It might be. Yeah.
Another question came in with regards to the granular privileges as examples of which kind of system privileges have been added that can be granular. I think there were a couple that were mentioned on the slide. I think the question is looking for maybe a few more examples.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have them off the top of my head. I would say that you can go into the SAP Service Marketplace portal now. All the documentation for SP100 or Carina, as we call it, is available, and it's explicitly denoted there. I personally am looking forward to Rob Vashur's new book, where it will have all that documented, but he hasn't published it yet.
Right. And another question is: are there any going back to the hashing for update stats? Are there any disadvantages to using that as opposed to the conventional update statistics?
No. I think almost everyone, once they get comfortable with how it works, will probably move over to utilize this for for both create index and for update statistics.
Okay, great. And I believe this is the last question that I've got on this list. Again, it's not presentation specific, but Raju asked if there was a number for the number of Business Suite customers that are currently using ASE in North America.
So I don't have the North American number off the top of my head. I know it globally. We've ASE has supported Business Suite now for about 18 months, a little over 18 months now. And in that period of time, we have a little over 1,000 unique customers that have made the decision to use ASE for the Business Suite. Our analysis shows that about about a third of those are net new customers, so new Business Suite as well as a new database to run it on. About a third of those are migrations from Oracle to ASE, and the last third are migrations from the other supported databases, kind of lumped together. So that's DB2, the SQL Server, Microsoft SQL Server, and SAP also has another database called MaxDB. It's not big very globally. It's more deployed mostly in Germany and kind of at the low end of the marketplace as well. So pretty good uptake. We're pretty pleased at the uptake, and I would also say that one of the really standout benefits of doing this work to support Business Suite is that it's kind of forced us to look at some of the things that maybe we've been avoiding doing in the product, because these customers are generally brand new to ASE. They've never touched or seen or smelled an ASE ever. And it's really forced us to kind of look at usability of the product from the inside out. Because when I sit down and talk to people like Ray Rankins and customers that have been using our product for 20 years, they know it inside and out, right? And so they don't tend to ask for things that perhaps would really make the product much more usable to someone who's coming from, say, an Oracle or even a Microsoft world. So a lot of benefits, and I hope you guys are seeing the benefit of using this now in in your systems. Mike?
Cool. Yeah, a couple more questions came in. Somebody asked, they've got multiple databases on the same server that are using 2K page size, and is there anything that's going to make migrating to a larger page size easier?
We are really looking at that right now. It is a very hard problem to solve, but we are looking at that right now. I'd love to be able to say we've got that one solved and ready for it to use, but not quite yet. And I do know that it is holding people back from being able to do that. I know the Sybase Migrate tool, is one option, but I don't think it's an option that a lot of people are using.
Okay. And another question was whether hashing can be used together and combined with sampling for update statistics.
I'm sorry, hashing.
Yeah, combine the hashing with the sampling.
Yeah. Yeah, no, those are not mutually exclusive.
Okay, and last question was that was basically how hard and complex a migration from one of those other databases to ASE actually is.
Kind of depends, right? Couple things that we're working on. Migration tooling is a big focus area for SAP, as you might imagine. SAP now has, courtesy of Sybase, quite a few new databases that that can be used and are used in the application space. We are just kind of finishing up a tool right now for Oracle to ASE migrations. It's not generally available, but if anyone's interested in doing some work with it, I would invite them to contact their sales rep and talk about that. The challenge is anybody who, like, say, I'll pick on Oracle because I like to pick on Oracle. And the same is true for any database, including Sybase, right? If you guys write applications that use every cool bell and whistle that a database vendor provides, the likelihood of being able to translate that into some other database's capabilities is hit and miss. I mean, that's why we do some of these things, is to create some compelling value that makes some sense for, for ASE or for Oracle or whatever. And so in some cases there aren't direct, translations to translate this PL SQL function into that transact SQL function or whatever. If you stick to like a generic API, like an ODBC, JDBC layer, typically those are very easy to migrate. If you're taking, an Oracle OCI application, again, that uses all the cool stuff that they provide, it's going to take effort. We think the tool that specific to Oracle, to ASE, that we're kind of wrapping up now, we're probably going to be able to convert somewhere in the neighborhood of 75 to 80% of the server-side code, PL SQL code, into T-SQL. So there's incremental work that's going to have to happen to convert the rest. The data stuff, the data side of this, right? A migration is there's lots of facets to it. And we've got the data piece of this covered with a combination of Power Designer to be able to slurp schemas out of these other databases and map them to ASE or IQ schemas. And we've got Rep Server that can do, real-time data movement from the Oracle SQL Server DB2 kind of world into ASE or IQ. So we've got the data side. It's really the app side that I think you're going to see a lot more from us over the course of the coming year. All right, I know we're way behind. First of all, I wanted to also, Mike, just thank Bradmark for sponsoring this and for talking to us about this surveillance tool. If you know me, I've been around monitoring for a long time. I wrote the first Sysmons and did a lot of the design work on the MDA table infrastructure. And I will tell you, in no uncertain terms, these guys have, without a doubt, the best monitoring solution out there, especially given it monitors, ASE, IQ, and Rep. So, single tool. And they also support the other databases. So for those of you who are heterogeneous in nature, and you haven't looked at Bradmark, you ought to be.
Okay, great. And that is the last question that we got. So my thanks to Peter and to Bill and to the folks at SAP that helped us put this together, and the folks at Bradmark that helped us put this together. As I said earlier, we'll have a recording and slides and also the answers to the questions that Peter didn't have live posted on the website in the next couple of days. And a reminder that we have 2 more of these in the next couple of months, one that will concentrate on Rep Server and one that will concentrate on IQ. And November 12th is the tentative date for the first of those 2 sessions, so look for that information in your inboxes soon. But with that, we will bring the session today to a close. Appreciate everybody spending their time with us today. I hope this was informative. And we will send out an email once everything is posted online so you can access the recording, etc. at that time. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.